Hi, I'm glad you joined me today. I'm Sally Duby, GM of the Bridge Group. Sales development has been and continues to be one of the hottest positions in B2B space. What was once telemarketing people stuck in a windowless basement is now risen to be a very integral step in the sales process. However, the market is shifting and we need to shift with it. So today I'm going to focus on 3 sales development trends, and I guarantee you that at least 1 or 2 will resonate with your organization today, but you need to be aware of all of them and how they will impact your team. There's a great bit of dialogue from The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway that reminds me of the current situation with SDRs. It goes like this: how did you go bankrupt? 2 ways: gradually and then suddenly. So here's my biggest fear for sales development. We all rush to hire, build, and scale our teams, but now there's a shift in the market. And smart companies are starting to say, hey, wait, let's think this through. What are we trying to accomplish, and will we get an ROI? So let's talk about some recent trends. I'm going to skip the most obvious trend, which is that hiring is really tough. We all know that, and we've talked lots about it, and we've been living it for many years. But what I want to talk about now is the return to enterprise sales. So over the past 7 years or so, with the rise of many SaaS companies, especially sales tools vendors, we were hyper-focused on inbound leads and selling to the SMB or mid-market. But over the last year or so, we've seen companies that have been in the mid-market going upstream. We're also seeing the return to focus on larger deals at larger companies, which also leads to less customer churn. So there isn't a one-size SDR team that fits all market segments. There's a lot more to role specialization than just inbound and outbound. This year, we've seen many VPs of sales expressing concern with SDR teams. They feel they aren't having an impact. And a lot of this is because SDR teams today are misaligned with sales and the multiple market segment sales teams are handling. These different market segments require different approaches and tactics. For example, in the enterprise, we are seeing success with small field events, such as SDRs calling to get executives at targeted companies to attend a small intimate lunch or dinner. SDR teams focused on the enterprise typically require different skill sets with different quotas and may have different end goals. One may be an introductory meeting, or as what we just talked about, it may be getting executives from a target list of accounts to attend a dinner or a lunch and learn. Our research shows that SDRs supporting the enterprise sales teams earn the most money. They have the longest tenure at companies as opposed to SDRs supporting the SMB market. And they are also the most experienced. This is not their first or even second job out of college. This isn't a spray and pray approach. Your SDR team is targeting a very specific set of accounts based on the ideal customer profile, which is also mapped to what the sales team is working on. This requires close collaboration with your VP of sales or CRO. We are unfortunately hearing a reoccurring theme from many sales leaders this past year that they're not getting value from their SDR teams. We find it typically falls into 2 areas. The meetings aren't from the right accounts, and they aren't with the right set of buyers. So let's look at this. Many SDR teams say they're targeting the Fortune 1000. Well, when we think about that, that's 1,000 accounts, right? And you have 10 SDRs? If you're lucky, maybe 20 or 30 SDRs, and you're going after 1,000 accounts? Now let's add in the different buyers in those 1,000 accounts. Maybe there's 5 buyers per account, 10 or 20 or even more. So now we're up to database size of 5,000 to 20,000 plus people that your SDR team of 10, 20, or 30 need to go after. Wow. How can your small team effectively go after that many buyers? So you do it by focusing on the prospects that have the highest propensity to buy. And you can find that using intent data, or it's based on verticals where you have proven success and great customer stories. You have to focus on the right buyer persona. Your team can't be going after a low-level person if they aren't someone your field sales team wants to talk to. Or again, close collaboration with sales is critical, so you have the right buyers that your team is focused on. And the key to make this all work, the glue that brings it all together, is the messaging your team uses. So I'm going to go on a rant here. A pet peeve of mine and why SDRs are getting slammed in LinkedIn is the horrible messaging being used today. Goes something typically like this. We're the best provider of XYZ, and I want to tell you how great we are. And a company that is nothing like you uses us. So tell me when I can tell you more about us. Now, why in the world would I ever respond to that email? Then a few days later, I get another email saying you didn't respond to my first email, so I'm sending you another one. When can we talk so I can tell you how great we are or show you a demo? Delete, delete. Then you get another one saying, hey, I just wanted to raise this up to the top of your inbox since you didn't respond again. I really hope none of your reps are using this sequence of emails, but I know by the volume that I get of these that lots of teams are using these kinds of emails. What actually gets buyers to respond is when you talk to them about things that are relevant and important to them, not you. When you can talk about business problems or pains that you solve for them, that's when the magic happens. This isn't something that your SDRs can typically develop for themselves. Marketing, product marketing, and sales collaboratively need to develop this business value propositions. So here's the reality. The enterprise market is different than mid-market or SMB. Besides the obvious that the deals are larger and they take longer and more people are involved in the buying cycle, and implementation is typically more complex. Companies that are looking to make $100,000 in investments typically don't come from downloading a white paper or go to webinars and fill out contact forms. The vast majority of these opportunities are from referrals, networks, or outbound prospecting. You very rarely can inbound your way into the enterprise. Did you know that Marketo has an outbound prospecting group focused on the enterprise? So if the leaders in inbound can't get inbound to work in the enterprise, how the heck are you going to make it work? So what are the steps that you can take? Again, you need to make sure that your SDR team is mapped by market segment, different approaches, different tactics. Ensure your enterprise SDRs are focused on the right companies and the right buyers with the right business value voicemails and emails. Let's stop this. I want to tell you how great we are emails, and you didn't respond, so I'm sending you another email. Okay, I'm done with my rant. So we all know hiring is hard, but retaining SDRs is even harder. Here's the challenge. There is an expectation gap between reps and leaders in terms of when they move to the next level. We've all had those reps who after 3 weeks want your job, and after 3 months, they're seeking the CEO's job. So let me ask a question. How soon is too soon to promote an SDR? So, are you shocked we did more analysis? Okay, work with me here. Matt Bertuzzi, our research analyst and guru, did some research in this area. Matt looked at over 300 LinkedIn profiles of SDRs who made the transition to AEs. And the selection criteria was they had been in the AE role for over 12 months. So keep in mind, this isn't really exactly scientific because what we used was title change, and that's all self-reported on LinkedIn. By the way, there's a lot of selective truth on LinkedIn, a whole lot. When we ran a separate research for reps we knew that had been terminated, at least 25% of them ignored that fact on their profiles. So here's what we found. From 300 reps, all third-degree connections, again, former SDRs who made the move to an AE role at least a year ago, the overall failure rate was 26%. That's 1 in 4. Of the 300 profiles, 26% lasted as an AE 6 months or less. And we expected that failure rate to be higher than an experienced external hire, but not that high. Also, it jumps up to 34% if they become an SDR right out of college. Now, you're probably thinking they may have gone to another company. Well, that's still a failure. You invested time and dollars training them to become an SDR, and you may have gotten 2 quarters if you're lucky. When we looked at SDRs who left their companies to take an AE role somewhere else, that failure rate climbed at 41%. Wow. These are significant percentages that every company needs to take into account. We also looked at the impact of tenure. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that the faster you promote them, the faster they fail. To say the impact is huge would be an understatement. The post-promotion failure rate for SDRs with 11 or fewer months experience was 55%. The failure rate for SDRs with 16 plus months experience was just 6%. That's a massive delta. None of this is to say you shouldn't promote your SDRs to AEs. But another quick story here. A $100 million SaaS company recently shared some interesting team data with us. Excluding recent hires the team currently had in place, the group had 55 terminations, promotions, transfers, and quits over the last 3 years. A little high, but not too far above the median. Breaking down the individual data, roughly 60% of his SDRs were promoted or internally transferred. That's great stuff. On the flip side, and a very concerning note, is nearly 40% of those SDRs promoted to an AE role had been terminated. You might disagree, but the one thing I hope you'll take away from this significant impact of SDR tenure on future success as an AE. Look at your own data and understand what's going on. And while we understand the desire to advance on the part of the SDRs, and I also understand the need to fill open headcount and the challenges of this tight labor market on the AE managers. But what I'm hoping to point out is that the two tendencies, if left unchecked, set no one up for success, not reps, not hiring managers, and not companies. And you know what? It's not the SDR's fault. It's our fault as leaders. And here's why it's our fault. Managers think that the SDRs want a new title or role, when what they really want is to learn new things to add to their resume and be challenged. There's a world of difference between I want to learn and grow and I'm ready to do something different. And managers who create learning environments have happier reps and less need for speed when it comes to role hopping. So get creative and build steps within roles. Look what SalesLoft did. SalesLoft has been kind enough to share their own comp plan, complete with comp and quota. So here's their micro promotion strategy. Notice there's bumps in salaries along the way, but they're also attached to bumps in quota. There's a mission for what you need to do in each role and skills you need to learn before you're eligible to move on. And notice as the SDR progresses and gets closer to moving to sales role, part of the skills they learn are related to selling, such as being able to give a demo or to give a sales presentation or negotiation and closing skills. And here's a big one. Also, don't assume every SDR wants to become an AE, especially after they come on board and see what an AE actually has to do and the stress. There should be many other roles SDRs can move into, such as marketing, operations, and customer success. Another tip, use this as part of your hiring process. It's a competitive differentiator. Everyone is clear on how their career path can evolve. And oh, by the way, it's very objective. It's not subjective. So here's the reality. SDRs want recognition and to tell their friends and to be able to update social postings that they got promoted. Managers need to fill AE headcount. So they're going with bad breath is better than no breath at all. 1 + 1 + 1 equals trouble in my book. So what can you do? Let's resist the urge to cave in. Let's set up our people to be successful. I think a really interesting one that I don't see enough of is diversify your profile. You don't always have to hire the young, inexperienced reps. The best teams that I've seen are ones that are very diversified in experience, in age, in gender, and in nationality. And make sure you've got enablement to help you out. So, a few years ago, sales development exploded, and it stayed that way ever since. It feels like every company, regardless of price point, was building SDR teams. They wanted their AEs closing and never paused to run any financial models on adding that incremental resource. Before that explosion, we were really used to justifying our existence all the time. Sales development and inside sales teams have traditionally been the place that get cut first when companies need to cut back on expenses and growth hasn't happened like they projected. VPs of sales, unfortunately, have historically protected their own field sales organizations, which is a little ironic and interesting because then they struggle with pipeline about 6 months down the road. It's a whole nother story for another day. I'm noticing that the pendulum is beginning to swing back. We've recently worked with 6 clients that are spending over $1 million a year on their own sales development teams, and their senior leadership is questioning the need for the role at all. The days of putting butts in seats to scale at all costs are ending, or at least being put under a microscope. Many companies were overpaying and overhiring SDRs to keep pipelines full. The growth projections looked fantastic, but reality wasn't meeting the growth projections, and the ROI models were really blurry. Profitability is rebalancing with growth now, and it's becoming a top priority. Senior executives are starting to demand solid ROI models around the role itself. As an SDR leader, you need to learn how to speak finances language and always be justifying your team's existence. Don't ever, ever leave it up to anyone else to do that. So if you haven't had to answer this question, you better be ready. What's the impact of your group on the top and bottom line? So let me tell you a story about a recent client. They started with 3 SDRs, loved the energy, loved what looked to be happening. They grew it to 6, promoted an SDR to a manager, then decided to go to 15 reps. Well, that first SDR manager couldn't make that to managing 15 reps, so they had to get rid of that manager. They brought in another manager who, get this, lasted 3 months and had to fire 3 or 4 SDRs. So what they're saying now is the team isn't making its quota. Meetings are only converting at 20% to further in the pipeline, which is horrible. And if every SDR is doing their own thing. Sound familiar? I hope not for your sake, but I hear this similar story almost daily. So what is sales saying when you aren't in the room? Are you providing them with leads in the right companies with the right buyers? We recently worked with one company where the SDRs are saying, we have a great relationship with sales and are providing them exactly what they want. They love us. Then when we talk to sales reps and sales leadership, they say they get leads from companies that aren't on their target list of accounts or with buyers they don't want to talk to and have no decision-making authority, or they're buyers they already have engaged with. Sales is saying we should just take that SDR headcount and get more AEs. Yikes, I never want to hear that. Make sure there isn't gaming of the system going on. We also are hearing sales reps say, well, the only reason my AEs are accepting SQLs or SALs is because the SDR rep says, come on, help me out, bud, by accepting this so I can get paid on it. That is a surefire way to derail your SDR program. Here's what you should be tracking and measuring by rep, by the entire team, and for the market segments you're covering. So these numbers and conversions will vary by market and role. So don't look at this and say, hey, we're at 65% of stage 1 conversion, so I'm doing good. You should have a model you're always working towards and then track actuals monthly. And this should get regularly distributed to your team so they know what's going on, your sales and marketing leaders, and the CFO. The good news is most of this you have control over. And you should always be looking to improve on activities and conversions. Don't go with status quo. And don't assume the sales team knows you're doing a great job. You as a sales leader need to constantly be showing them. So the reality is the CFO, the VP of sales, the VP of marketing are going to question the impact of your team on a regular basis, whether you know it or not, they're doing it. You need to figure out how to measure your contribution, and you need to know your numbers. So every time you look at the numbers, every time you want to spend more money, add more headcount, go back to your model and look at it through that lens. What's your model? What is adding one person going to add to the bottom line? That's the best way to talk to your sales and marketing leaders and the CFOs. And again, make sure you share the model and your actuals with those leaders, and that you're a constant alignment with sales. One thing I want to point out is, just because if you're an SDR team and you report into the sales team, don't assume that makes you in constant alignment with sales. It does not. And you need to have those conversations and make sure you know exactly what the sales team is, how it's segmented, and what the most important segments are for your team to support. That's communication. So, on parting thoughts. So, in the first trend, make sure that your role specialization is more than just inbound and outbound, and it's mapped by market segment to your sales teams. Resist the urge to promote an SDR that isn't ready. Don't always hire just an experienced rep. Again, diversify your hiring profile, mix it up, and know your numbers and contribution. Talk about it and share it with your leaders. I would love to hear from you. Feel free to reach out. There's my LinkedIn, my Twitter, @SallyDuby. And I'd love to hear about your success, what's working for you, or what challenges you're running into. Again, look at the Bridge Group resources. We have a lot of fantastic free resources and data. You don't have to pay to get our data. So go to our website and look for that. And again, feel free to reach out to me. And thank you for listening.